Akhenaten was a pharaoh in the 18th dynasty, father of the famous King Tut. He would soon be called the Heretic King because of the extent at which ancient Egyptians want to erase his legacy from history. Because of this, very little is known about him, but what we do know about him makes us wonder who or what he really was. Let's begin with his appearance. First, unlike every pharaoh before him, Akhenaten chose to have himself depicted the way he actually looked. And we have to admit, his appearance is remarkably strange. Almond-shaped eyes, a pot belly, spindly limbs, and an elongated skull. His look was a stark contrast to every previous pharaoh before him. They chose to only have themselves depicted in top physical form. Akhenaten soon turned Egypt on its head by creating the greatest act of heresy that Egyptians had ever known. Akhenaten proclaimed that the Egyptians would no longer believe in a pantheon of multiple gods, but would now worship only one god. Because of this, it's been speculated that Akhenaten and the biblical Abraham might be one and the same. However, Akhenaten did not truly believe in monotheism, the belief in one god. He absolutely believed the other gods existed, but decided that they would no longer be worshipped, but all worship and prayers would now only belong to one god, the Aten, or better known as the sun. Everything about this pharaoh was different, all the way down to his DNA. Stuart Fleischmann, assistant professor of comparative genomics at the Swiss University in Cairo, and his team have recently published a result of a 7-year study that mapped the genomes of 9 ancient Egyptian pharaohs. 8 of the pharaohs sampled were completely normal, but the 9th sample taken from the tomb of KV55, believed to be Akhenaten, was highly unusual. Fleischmann and his team subjected the precious samples of ancient DNA to a process called polymerase chain reaction, PCR. In the field of molecular biology, this technique is often used to replicate and amplify a single copy of a piece of DNA, giving researchers a clear picture of someone's genetic fingerprint. A small fragment from the brain tissue has been the source of the DNA sample, and the test was reported using bone tissue, but the same results were obtained. One of the culprits' name was the CXPAC-5, which is responsible for cortex growth. It appears this increased activity in Akhenaten's genome would suggest that he had a higher cranial capacity because of the need to house a larger cortex. But what mutation would have caused the human brain to grow? Telomerase, a genetic enzyme, is only expanded by 2 processes: extreme aging and extreme mutation. Genetic and archaeological data suggests Akhenaten lived to be about 45 years of age. This is not nearly enough to consume all the chromosomal telomeres. This hypothesis is also backed up by the fact that electron microscopes analysts reveal signs of nucleatic cicatrix, which is a telltale sign of DNA helix healing after being exposed to strong mutagens. Results of the osseous tissue sampled from the skull of Akhenaten, it is far denser and fundamentally different from other mummies of the same age and period. Akhenaten's skull and skeletal structure are twice as dense and twice as strong as modern humans. Stuart Fleischmann is now being celebrated for making this incredible discovery. However, Stuart shouldn't pop the cork just yet, because we made a discovery of our own. A link from ancient history that the academic world has completely overlooked. Herodotus, also known as the world's first historian, gives a brief description about visiting an ancient battlefield between Egyptian and Persian armies. On this field where this battle was fought, I saw a very wonderful thing which natives pointed out to me. The bones of the slain lie scattered upon the fields in 2 lots. Those of the Persians in one place by themselves, as the bodies lay first, those of the Egyptians in the other place apart from them. If then you strike the Persian skulls, even with a pebble, they were so weak you'd break a hole in them. But the Egyptian skulls were so strong that you might smite them with a stone and you'd scarcely break them in. They gave me the following reason for the difference, which seemed to me more likely enough. The Egyptians from early childhood have shaved their heads, and so by the action of the sun, the skulls became thick and hard. The same cause prevents baldness in Egypt, where you see fewer bald men than any other land. Such then is the reason why skulls of Egyptians are so strong. The Persians, on the other hand, had feeble skulls, because they kept themselves shaded from the sun, wearing turbans upon their heads. Now obviously Herodotus could not understand why the Egyptians' bones were so strong. He equated it to shaving their heads and getting lots of sun. Now fast forward a couple thousand years, and now we understand the science of genetics. These are a few paragraphs written thousands of years ago and now validating this new genetic study. And also adding to it because it proves not only that Akhenaten genetically different, but in fact entire armies were genetically different. It's also interesting to note that having bones twice as strong as your opponent means absolutely nothing in battle. Just like other countries, at the time of the Persians, armies decimated the Egyptians, which led the way for Herodotus to make this amazing discovery. This study might not prove that alien hybrids were walking around with ancient Egyptians or ruling out them as pharaohs, but it does suggest it. Currently, there is a second team attempting to reproduce Stuart Fleischmann's findings, hoping to either disprove or validate his work. Was Akhenaten a hybrid alien with its own DNA?
When it comes to ancient Egypt, nothing is more highly debated than the age of the Sphinx. Some people believe it's over 5,000 years old, and some others believe it's between 12 to 13,000 years old, and some also think that it's up to 25,000 years old. So why such different times? Why is there no consensus of the age of the Sphinx? Well, there's a few things we know for sure. First, the Sphinx is older than the pyramids. Well, how do we know this? Well, going by standard Egyptian chronology, there are records indicating the existence of the Sphinx before the reign of Khufu, the creator of the Great Pyramid. In modern times, when we had discovered the Sphinx, it was covered up to its neck in sand. So there was a long time it was believed that the Sphinx was nothing but a head. But as excavations started to take place all around Egypt, it was discovered that it was not just a head, but there's an entire body attached to the Sphinx. And now, today, modern geologists who study the Sphinx determined that the outside perimeter wall has been eroded away by rain and water. It's fairly unanimous in the world of academia that it hasn't rained like that in over 11,000 years. So even in ancient times, the Sphinx was already ancient, and the Sphinx isn't alone. There's another place in Egypt that was ancient in ancient times. And this temple is unlike any of its surrounding temples near it. It's 15 meters under the ground, and it's made from giant, perfectly cut pieces of solid granite. And although granite is used in a lot of statues and blocks in Egypt, there are no buildings made of solid granite, except for Osirian. If that wasn't strange enough, the Osirian is also lower than the natural water table, so every year, the Osirian fills with water and has to be pumped out. But then, a discovery was made that blew everything else out of the water. Now, while everyone was so wrapped up in the discovery of Tomb Osiris, people were distracted away from the incredible engineering that took place. They started with a shaft, cut 20 feet straight down, then took a 90-degree angle, then went out 40 foot more, then went straight down another 40 feet, till you came to a staging room that had 7 hollowed out carved places inside were 7 granite stone sarcophagi. And in the corner of that room was found another shaft, cut straight down to 90 feet underneath the Sphinx. And there they found the tomb of Osiris, a sarcophagus that was over 12 feet long, whose lid alone weighed 9 tons. It rested in a pool of water surrounded by 4 pillars on each corner. They had appeared to be at one time black granite stone obelisk, but has since been destroyed. So was there a god in there? Who was inside this giant sarcophagus? Well, Egyptologists tell us nobody was in there. It was a symbolic tomb, and this place was a place of prayer and worship. Although there are no remnants of any offerings to the gods or sacrifices that were made, and there were no ladders of any means of getting down to the tomb. Another interesting point is the shape and design of the tomb of Osiris. It has no markings. no magical inscriptions to ensure the God's King's passage into heaven. It was blank, not a single hieroglyphic on the tomb itself, anywhere. It was pretty rare for any sarcophagus to be made up of solid granite, but there is no other place that contains a giant sarcophagi, and it's just as mysterious as this tomb. They weigh up to 50 tons and were carved from a single block of granite. Sarcophagi were moved underground through hallways carved out of bedrock that are barely wide enough for the sarcophagi to fit through. Now, there are theories on how they move stones for constructing their pyramids. Are there any other gods that have a tomb? Why is Osiris depicted with his dark green alien skin? Was it to represent his death and what happens to the human body after it dies? Or was it meant to represent an alien god who descended from the stars? Or was this just a figment of the imagination of some ancient Egyptian? It does seem curious that the ancient Egyptians don't speak of Osiris as some kind of men spoke about him as a king of their past. Their first king, the creator of civilization, he had his own land. His brother and sister has had land as well. He had his own people that prayed to him, his own temples dedicated to him. Laws and rules were governed by him. And for example, to show you how far back in time that Osiris supposedly existed, his first rules for helping to create civilization was that his followers, man, can no longer eat each other. He banned cannibalism. One of the first laws decreed by the Lord Osiris that no man can do. He made many laws, purchases, lands, trade in slaves, ordered construction, and a list of other things that any normal human might do, but was no normal human. He was the first god king, Lord Osiris, creator of civilization. I want to get your opinions, people, below of what was the pharaoh Osiris up to? Why did he reveal what the Sphinx truly looks like? Some people say there's many other secrets of the Sphinx that is still yet to be revealed. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Keep your eyes on the skies. Blake Cousins. We'll see you again next time.